Morning. My name is Matthew Agostini, and today I'll be going through my top 10 books in my high school career. So, at number 10, I'm going to be going with a kind of controversial one. Mr. Kirkhoff wasn't so sure about it, he didn't think it was good enough to be on this list, but I stuck with my heart, with my gut, and so here it is Maniac Magee by Jerry Spinelli. You can see it's kind of worn down from all the reading that I've done of it. So, a quick summary of this book is a kid named Maniac Magee, which is his nickname. He was orphaned at a young age, and then his aunt and his uncle just kept on fighting, and so eventually he ran away. So it shows him his adventures of growing up, and you stick with him for a total of, I think it's like 2 years, maybe 3 years, as he bounces from place to place. And what this book shows really well is the racism in the world, and so it talks about, for example, his experiences with the African American family in an African American neighborhood, and his experiences with like a white family in a white neighborhood, and it shows how he didn't really see racism. He just saw them as people that were taking care of him and that were helping him. And so something that this book does really well is juxtaposition. So if you read through it, you just see juxtaposition all over the place. You see a ton of things compared, put next to each other, and just exaggeratedly different, even though it can be the same thing. And so I think that Jerry Spinelli chose to use juxtaposition because of what he wanted to portray, which was the racism in the world, I guess, and it was also the struggles of a kid. And the juxtaposition really helps him to really get messages across that were necessary for the reader to find. Number 9 spot is a decently well-known book by a decently well-known author. It is The Green Mile by Stephen King. So the reason that it's so low, even though it's like by a pretty good author, is because I felt a lot of times that I had to force myself to read it, and I don't know, it just wasn't my type of story. So a quick summary of it is that this man he's described as this huge man, like 6 foot something, black, huge. So he's sent to jail for apparently killing this little girl and raping her. But like throughout the story, he's seen as like genteel, as nice, as like a kind human being. So he's sent to the Green Mile, which is like a slang term for where prisoners on death row are held until they're put in the electric chair. And the story follows one of the guards there as he like gets to know this man and how he starts to have doubts about what he's doing and if it's right or wrong. And it follows like all the torturous thoughts that are going on in that like godforsaken place. And so literary device that is used really well in The Green Mile is symbolism. There's a ton of different forms of symbolism throughout it. So for example, there's this rat that belongs to one of the prisoners that's shown as symbolism, and it's just all around. You just feel like the whole book you've got symbolism jumping at you from place to place. And it's just really interesting the way that Stephen King can make any simple thing, for example, like he can make a hole in the ground be seen as a huge symbolism for how all the prisoners are just deep inside. They just want to escape and they want to leave, even though they're resigned to their fate. And it's just really interesting how he can just like put symbolism into anything. So that's why it's at my number 9. And my number 8 spot is actually not a book. It's like a drama, a play, a comedy. So it's Much Ado About Nothing, written by Shakespeare. And so it's in my number 8 spot because I really appreciated it when I read it. When at first I didn't understand it, and as I became more accustomed with like the old language, the old English, I kind of understood the humor in it a bit more. And so a quick summary of it is basically these like knights or lords go into this palace of another man. And so Don John, Don Pedro, Benedict, they all arrive, like the whole squad. And so it's kind of about how like eavesdropping and lies and malinterpretations can kind of mess up a whole story. And so it's about how Don John is trying to mess everything up by like lying and by making sure people hear things that they weren't supposed to hear. And throughout the story there's like a ton of love stories and everything. And so the literary device that I found really strongly in this and that made me really appreciate it was puns and like wordplay, because I felt like throughout the whole story it was like there were a ton of moments where I had to like go back and reread it and be like, huh? Like, is that really what he said, or did he mean something else? But it felt natural, like it felt funny. Like it wasn't just me like reading back because I didn't understand it. It was me reading back because I had to like I had to interpret it better because it was harder. It was like a joke. So this is why it makes my number 8 spot. My number 7 spot is going to a book called Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I don't have a copy here, so I'm going to put up a picture of the cover right now. And the reason I like this book so much was because the way that it's written felt really deep. And it was a coming of age story. It's about these two kids, Aristotle and Dante, and how they're kind of different. For example, Dante's like outgoing, fun, he's known, he has friends, while Aristotle kind of sticks to himself. He's quiet, he's a loner. And it shows how their friendship grows, and it shows how little by little they're like learning how to be themselves and how to go out into the world and actually live. So the story has a lot of foreshadowing in it, which I really appreciated. Like, for example, it showed, not to spoil it, but it shows like this bird that they find with a broken wing, which leads to something else that happens later on in the story that you never would have guessed, except for the bird kind of hinting at it. And so the book is really interesting in the way that it's written, because it kind of like, teenagers always like over exaggerate their thoughts, their actions, like their emotions, but the book somehow finds a way to put that over exaggeration in like a way that we can relate to. So when I was reading it, I felt really like touched, because this was like what I was thinking. Like I had thought this before, the same thing that like the main character Aristotle was thinking. So that's why it makes my number 7, because it really connected. Some of the stuff in it really connected with me, but it's also like it has some gay stuff in it, some homosexual stuff, so that didn't really connect. Number 6 is called The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. So I chose this story because it caught my attention by the way it was written, because most stories are written with the main character having like a special power, being the chosen one, or having a quest. The main character in this story is none of those. He's just this ordinary kid with friends, with 2 or 3 friends, but it still has a storyline to it where there is a main character, but he has no connection to that main character. He's like if he was in the story, he would be like the 5th character, like a secondary character, like a quadruple character. And so since he has no connection to it, it shows how his life is like by comparison normal to other people, but how he still finds his happiness with like the friends that he has and his family. And so it shows how even though he's not the main character, he still has problems in his life. So for example, his mom is a politician who doesn't really pay attention to them. His dad is an alcoholic, he suffers from OCD. His sister Meg is a reformed anorexic. His name is Mikey, by the way. So the 4 like people that it zeroes in on really is Meg, Mikey, Henna, and Jared. And so it shows how these 4 people kind of have to deal with everything that's going on in town. So while all around them, there's like an invasion from a different parallel universe, but they have nothing to do with that. They're just living their own life. So I think it's also kind of a coming of age story, and it was really interesting the way it was written. Something that it uses a lot of is understatement, because the fact that there's a whole parallel universe invading to where they are, but they still have to live their own life, go to jobs, show up for like press meetings since their mom is a politician, and deal with like the hardships of like graduating high school because they're all seniors. I think that the understatement used is really good, like masterful in a way, because it shows how everything going around you is kind of irrelevant to what's happening inside of you. So that's why it makes my number 6 spot, because it was different, it was original, and I've never seen anything like it before or after. 5 book is called The History of Love by Nicole Cross, and I'm gonna put the title here. So I'm gonna try to summarize it, but there's 4 different like plot lines, storylines to follow, like 4 different characters, so it's gonna be kind of hard for me to be able to explain it well. I'll give it my best shot. So one of the more important people is Leopold Gursky, and so he's a Holocaust survivor from Poland, and the way that he's introduced is by showing how in love he was with this girl called Alma Mirominski, and how he was a failed author in Poland. In Poland he was a failed author, and before he moved to America, in America he became a locksmith. But the one story that he thought was worthwhile and good was a story that he wrote about Alma Mirominski. But when he survives the Holocaust and he gets sent to America, that story becomes lost to him, and he has no idea where it is. So the story unbeknownst to him, is published by somebody else that stole it. Or I didn't steal it, but well, yeah, that stole it. And someone buys that story and names his daughter after the story. So the story is called The History of Love, just like the actual book. And so he names his daughter after Alma Miraminsky in the story. And that person tries to connects with Leopold Gertzky accidentally. But the story is so, like, I know I did a bad job explaining it, but it's like impossible to explain because there's 4 different people that are like each telling their own version, and it's like what made me put it at number 5 is that it's such a page turner in the essence that there's so many like different revelations and like so many different revelations that you just can't stop reading it because every time that you find out something new, it just makes you want to read more and more and more. So it has a lot of foreshadowing. Like the whole story, if you're smart enough to notice all the foreshadowing, you can kind of guess the ending when you're about like, I don't know, like halfway through, 3/4 of the way through. But that foreshadowing is really hard to pick up on. It also has a lot of allusions. It talks about like the Beatles, and it talks about like it puts a lot of like Jewish things in there, a lot of Greek and Roman stuff. And I felt it was really well written with the allusions, because all the allusions that, I know there were a lot more, but all the ones that I picked up really helped strengthen that part of the book that it was using the allusions in. And also the foreshadowing was really well done, because it was like it reminded me of the Green Mile, because it showed like a lot of small things. I mean, not the Green Mile, sorry. It reminded me of the Aristotle and Dante one, because it mentioned a lot of small things, but it just made them bigger and bigger, and it just kept on building on these things until like you finally get to the big revelation, and you're just left in complete shock because you're like, oh yeah, I remember that from the beginning. So that's why I have it at my number 5. And I really would recommend it. It's just really hard to explain. The book is Reincarnation Blues by Michael Poore. And Reincarnation Blues, a quick summary of it, is it follows this spirit, this soul called Milo, and it shows how he's the oldest soul alive ever. And so it shows how he keeps on being reincarnated, and the point of life is to like achieve perfection so you can become part of the universe. But after his first death, he falls in love with death, like herself, because death has like like an avatar, I guess, like a person that she embodies. And so since he falls in love with her, every time that he goes back into life, he's looking forward to death to be reunited with her. So he never really tries to find perfection, and it all seems to be fine, except that eventually his deaths are running out, because you only have 10,000 deaths, and he was on his last one, and he had one more chance to be perfect. And so the story is interesting because I'm not really, like, I haven't really read up on anything about like reincarnation from different cultures and stuff, but the way that it's like shown is pretty straightforward and easy to follow. And I thought it was really cool how like it didn't just stay in the past, but like this is someone that like, oh yeah, he died to soldiers, he like got catapulted, but he also like died in a car crash, and he also like he died of like a heart attack. Like it's like different deaths in different eras, but he lived through all of them. And the way that it's written isn't slow at all, and it's not like boring. Like it's funny, it's witty, and that's the literary device that I picked, which was puns, because it uses puns really well, and it has like a lot of that type of language, like wit, puns, and like wordplay, that made it really enjoyable throughout the whole story. My third book is also by Michael Poore. It's called Up Jumps the Devil, and it takes the biggest antagonist, the biggest anti-hero ever, which is a devil, and it makes him into like the main character, and it makes him someone that's like lovable, someone that you actually kind of like. And so a quick summary of the book is when the devil rebels in the first place and he goes down to heaven, he does so not just by himself, but with the love of his life, this angel called Arden. But eventually Arden can't take the brutality of earth, and she goes back up to heaven. And so the devil the whole time is trying to make the earth as good as heaven, so the love of his life can come back. So the story follows him throughout Egypt, Rome, the beginning of North America, the present time, and it's really interesting. It uses a lot of flashbacks because the story, like the reason for him trying to make like the world good, or to make the world like a shiny place, which is like for his love to come down, isn't obvious at first, and it's shown by the flashbacks. And it also has a lot of allusions. It references, for example, Woodstock. It references some of Greek and Roman stories, and also references pop culture, like Miley Cyrus, Justin Bieber. It has like the Beatles there too, and it's really interesting how Michael Poore can put like a twist on anything, and make it, and like put the devil's like touches on it to show that he was there and that he influenced it. And I think it was a really good book. It was like, it's really original, and it also has a lot of wit and like comedy because it's written by the same person that wrote Reincarnation Blues. So I definitely recommend it. It's really good. My number 2 spot is one of my favorite poems ever. It's called One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. So we actually read this poem in class this year in AP Literature, and it's like a quick summary of it is about this lady that's talking about everything that she's lost in life. So she mentions like countries, continent, rivers, and it starts simple. It talks about like keys or like letters and stuff like that, and it just keeps on building and building and building. And I found it really powerful, showing how like she lost everything, but starting simple, and how she described it as like, not like, she didn't describe loss as a loss, but she described it as an art, as something that you can master, something you can get good at. And it has a lot of like imagery because it describes everything really well. It also has a lot of alliteration because like the repeated form of like lost, like I've lost a lot of things, is used really well, and I think it's really well written. It's one of my favorite poems ever. Number 1 spot in my top 10 list is going to Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. So this poem, in my opinion, is a masterpiece. Its writing is beautiful. It uses really good allusion when it mentions Eve. It uses really good personification when it, like, for example, he calls nature her, and that has really good imagery. For example, nature's first green is gold, its hardest hue to hold. It's just, I don't know, just the imagery that it has really lets me, like, I can really picture the poem in itself. Like, I feel like every single line just brings a new picture to my head. It makes me feel so powerfully. So in my opinion, this is the favorite thing that I've probably ever read. Like, I've been meaning to hang it up in my room, on my wall somewhere. Like, it's that good. Like, it's gonna stay with me for a while. So that's why it's my number 1 spot. I think it's amazing.